You wouldn't believe me if I told you the most dangerous man I ever worked with never said a word. Not once. It wasn't his silence that unsettled me. It was the way his fingers moved, like they'd been trained by something colder than language. Back then, 1977, I was 5 years into a long, slow death in East Berlin's code office. Just another mold-chewing paper in a bunker with no windows and too many secrets. Then Marcus showed up, young, left-handed, and faster on a typewriter than I was with my thoughts. We all assumed he was one of ours, or one of theirs. Truth is, no one knew. What I can tell you now, after all these years and all these ghosts, is this: he didn't just decode enemy messages. He rewrote the war. Before I regret saying any of this, hit that like button. Subscribe if this is already making you uncomfortable. And tell me what city you're watching from, and what time it is. I like knowing where in the world people still dare to listen to secrets like these. East Berlin, January 1977. The cold was normal. The silence wasn't. The first thing you noticed was the smell like rusted iron and yesterday's coffee, left to congeal in a dented mug. That smell stayed with you. It got into your clothes, your fingers, your thoughts. We called it the code room, but it was really a basement annex beneath the Central Postal Authority, 3 blocks east of the wall. The kind of place where ventilation was a rumor and the flicker of fluorescent tubes passed for daylight. I'd been working there since '72. My badge said I was a civilian liaison from the Diplomatic Pouch Division. In truth, I was a CIA field asset placed inside the GDR's civilian routing office to track movement patterns in their state communications, what we called meta traffic. I was good at what I did. Not flashy, not fast, just steady. Which is why Marcus's arrival bothered me from day one. He didn't knock. He didn't greet. He just sat, like he'd always been there. They told us he was a temp, a support analyst from Dresden. Young. Too young, if you ask me. Couldn't have been more than 22. But he walked like someone who knew exactly how long every hallway was. Left-handed, sharp jaw, no calluses on his palms. The kind of man who looked like he should be selling cigarettes outside a nightclub, not buried in cipher traffic. First day on the job, he typed 34 pages of intercepts in under 2 hours. No typos, no corrections, no questions. Just the steady rhythm of keys tap, tap, shift, tap. Someone made a joke about his speed. He didn't even smile. Didn't look up. Just kept typing. The joke stopped being funny after day 3. By the end of his first week, they'd moved him to the main desk, right across from me. He'd sit with his elbows sharp and square, posture like a metronome. Type, recheck, file. Type, recheck, file. There was no chatter, no questions about process. He already knew the system better than most of us. One morning, I saw him reclassify a packet before the supervisor even opened it, just by the header code, like he had the cipher index memorized. I remember thinking, either this kid's a prodigy, or someone handed him our playbook weeks ago. I should have flagged it then, but I didn't. I let it pass. Because when someone makes your job easier, you thank them. Even if it doesn't feel right. Then came the first anomaly. A report I'd filed the week before came back, same stamp, same initials, but the content had shifted. Nothing overt, just cleaner, as if someone had polished the language. When I checked the logbook, I saw his handwriting. He'd retyped it for clarity. I confronted him, asked who gave him the authority to revise field intercepts. He didn't look offended, just pointed to a memo I hadn't seen, authorizing efficiency edits for high-volume packets. Signed by the deputy director. Real seal, real date. I should have known. Memos don't appear overnight in East Berlin. They're built, layered, crafted for when someone asks too many questions. Weeks passed. He never broke rhythm. Everyone liked him. In that distant way, you're like a clock that never fails. But I started watching him more closely. Not because I had proof, because I had instinct. He never took breaks with the others. Never left crumbs or stains. His desk was always perfect. Too perfect. One Friday, just before closing, I saw him pull a fresh sheet of paper and type a full paragraph. No heading. No number. Just code. He folded it, slid it into a blank envelope, and tucked it into his satchel. When I asked what it was, he said, "Drafting practice." He said it like someone who'd practiced the answer 100 times. And maybe he had. That should have been the moment I acted. Instead, I went home, poured myself a drink, told myself I was being paranoid, and that's the problem with silence. Sometimes it fills in the answers for you. By the third week, we stopped trying to make him speak. He didn't nod, didn't hum, didn't clear his throat like the rest of us when the cold settled in our lungs. He just typed. There was something about the way his fingers moved that made you feel like speaking would interrupt something sacred or dangerous. We all noticed it. No one admitted it. One guy taped a cartoon on his desk, some caricature of a monk with duct tape over his mouth. Marcus didn't even glance at it. By the next morning, the cartoon was gone. So was the guy. Transferred to Rostock. No one said a word. After that, people stopped making jokes. Thing is, his silence made us lean in. We started depending on him without meaning to. Every time there was a difficult string, some tangled Soviet abbreviation or ambiguous numeric sequence, someone would pass it to Marcus. He never hesitated. He'd scan it once, then type it out in clean, crisp English with spacing that even the station chief admired. Not once did he check the cipher book. He didn't need to. One night, I stayed late. It was snowing like hell outside, and the trams were frozen in place. I found myself staring at a transmission we'd pulled from a shortwave pickup in Leipzig. The code didn't match anything we'd seen before. Off pattern. Reversed blocks. Looked like a decoy, but the header had top-tier priority. I sat with it for an hour, then another. I was about to shoulder it when I heard the click of a second typewriter behind me. He was there. No coat, no sound, just typing beside me. He slid his version across the desk. One sentence stood out. Courier route compromised. Agent exposed. Shift extraction window. He pointed to a symbol I hadn't noticed. A buried marker from an old KGB format, abandoned years ago. He tapped it twice. That's all. Then he stood, pulled his gloves on, and walked out. The next morning, Berlin Central confirmed that the message had been real. We rerouted the agent. In Leipzig, saved his life, apparently. The supervisor gave me credit for the decode. I didn't correct him, but in my gut, I felt something twist. Marcus hadn't asked questions. He hadn't even seen the original memo. So how did he know what it meant? The office dynamic changed after that. He became essential. Supervisors stopped reviewing his files. Messages that used to go through 3 levels of clearance now went straight to him. It was like giving a scalpel to a ghost. And me? I started staying later, watching him. Not because I suspected him, because part of me trusted him. Hell, I even felt grateful. That decode in Leipzig? It bought me favor I hadn't had in years. I convinced myself he was on our side. I even told a field officer, he's strange, but he's sharp, the kind you protect. So I did, when a senior translator made a remark about procedural inconsistencies. In Marcus's logs, I shut him down, told him to stop interfering, told him, word for word, if you can't match his work, Don't question it. Question it. A week later, that translator asked for reassignment. He never gave a reason. Neither did I. I told myself I was defending efficiency. In truth, I was defending him. And when I look back at that moment, standing in that freezing hallway, watching, his door close behind him, I remember something I hadn't noticed then. The door never clicked shut. It was already unlocked. Started with a skip in the signal. One of the junior operators flagged a transmission from Warsaw that came through, with a chunk missing. It wasn't unusual. Soviet lines had interference all the time, whether faulty relays, sloppy encoding. But this one was too clean. Like someone had erased a paragraph and realigned the margins. The timestamp didn't match the carrier wave. That's what tipped me off. I reran the recording, same gap. But now I noticed something else. The frequency log had been duplicated. Same ID code, 2 different timestamps. Someone had piggybacked a signal using our own inbound routing. And that doesn't happen by accident. I reported it to the station chief. He didn't blink. Just said, double up on logs and don't talk about it again. Which, in our world, meant we're already too late. The next morning, they posted the new rotation schedule. Sudden transfers, reassignments. People who had worked together for years were now in separate shifts. Surveillance staff moved 2 floors up. Radio verification was now remote. It was the Cold War's version of musical chairs. Someone had turned on the music, and we didn't know how many seats were left. Inside the code room, the silence thickened. No more jokes, no more side comments. Marcus, as usual, didn't seem affected. In fact, he looked sharper. His shirt was always pressed, his documents always ready. If he noticed the rest of us sweating through our collars, he didn't show it. He typed like he knew exactly how long the chaos would last. And that scared me more than the interference. One night, I intercepted a coded page that looked almost identical to one I'd seen the week before. Same signature, different content. I laid them side by side. They weren't duplicates, they were layers. Someone was transmitting in 2 levels, one for us and another for someone else. It was a method I hadn't seen since Budapest, '68. We called it echo coding. You send a fake message for your adversaries to decode, and embedded inside, for the right eyes, is the real one. I ran a comparison. The echoes were all tied to transmissions Marcus had handled directly, not as part of the routing team, but as the final transcriber, the one person allowed to retip for legibility. That was his official function. Clean copy, error-free, no trace. I could have raised it. I should have. But by then, I was compromised in a different way. I had vouched for him. My signature was on every personnel form authorizing his file clearance. And every time he decoded something brilliant, it reflected back on me. So I did what field agents do best when the truth smells like burning wires. I waited, watched, and kept my mouth shut. Then came the 3rd skipped message. This one was flagged by an external node in Prague. We weren't even supposed to receive the alert, but some junior comms tech routed it wrong. The message wasn't just altered, it was redirected. Halfway through transit, it had split. One, part to us. The other, encrypted in a mirror frequency, straight out of Berlin. Someone was slicing the cake and feeding both sides. The memo from HQ was short. Potential breach. Audit all operators. Begin passive surveillance. The walls got ears. Marcus kept typing. Faster, cleaner, like a man composing his own exit. And all I could think was, if this was chess, we weren't even on the board. The lights died at 22:17. No warning. No flicker, just dead. The entire East Sector grid dropped in one breath, like someone cut the lungs out of the building. In Berlin, That kind of blackout wasn't rare. But in our office, it wasn't allowed. We had triple redundancies, diesel, backups, manual overrides, which meant someone had flipped the wrong switch, or the right one. We froze. No one spoke. Some reached for flashlights. One guy knocked over a tray of classified forms. Me? I stayed still. There's a certain silence that doesn't feel like silence. It feels like permission. I listened. Not to the generators, not to footsteps, to the rhythm that was no longer there. Marcus. I moved carefully, half memory, half instinct. Felt along the wall toward our corner. I expected to find an empty desk. Instead, I heard it. That same pattern. Tap, tap, shift, tap. He was typing. In total darkness, no light, no guide, just fingers flying like the keys were speaking back. I didn't say anything, didn't breathe too loud, just stood there, invisible, while he finished a full page, then another. He folded each sheet slowly, like he already knew where they were going. Then he stopped and said, without turning, "Generators down." Might be a while. First time I'd heard his voice. Calm, unbothered, like this was just another Tuesday night. When the lights blinked back, he was gone from his desk. Bathroom, supposedly. That's what he told the supervisor. But I'd seen him, right there. Typing like light didn't matter. Like truth didn't need permission. The rest of the team acted normal. Shaken maybe, but no one suspected anything was missing. Except me. 3 tapes were out of order. 2 decodes had been removed from the log shelf and put back in the wrong sequence. That never happened. Not in that office. Not with him around. I asked the archive clerk about it. He shrugged. Said someone probably misfiled them during the confusion. But that room was locked during outages. Only 2 people had keys, and one of them hadn't moved all night. I went back to my desk, looked at the typewriter, at the stack of blank forms, then at the trash bin. Inside were carbon copies, used, smudged, curled at the corners, not in his style. Marcus never left traces, unless he wanted to. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed the rhythm. Tap, tap, shift, tap, like a code hiding in plain sound. The next morning, I asked casually where he'd studied typing. He just smiled barely and said, "Practice and muscle memory." I remember thinking he wasn't talking about the typewriter. He was talking about us. I started checking his pages, not just glancing, checking, line by line. Each morning before the others arrived, I'd take a stack from the outgoing bin and cross-reference them with our original intercepts. No red flags, no errors. Everything looked clean. Too clean. Then came the repeats. At first, I thought it was coincidence. A familiar block of numerals, maybe just recycled phrasing from Soviet jargon. But no, these were exact replications. Not in whole messages, but fragments. 8-digit strings appearing in unrelated communications, weeks apart. Same code, same spacing, same hands on the keys. Marcus's hands. The cipher team always said random didn't mean unique. But I'd been in the game long enough to know. When randomness became routine, I ran one string through our dead code file. It hit on an old pattern used in '74 during a defection operation in Vienna. That one ended in a suicide. The echo wasn't accidental. So I took more sheets. Quietly. Slipped a few pages from his discard pile into my coat. Back home, I laid them out under a desk lamp. Red pen in hand, I circled every sequence that rang a bell. The picture wasn't obvious, but it was there. Marcus wasn't just typing up intercepts. He was embedding repeat codes, layered fragments, loops within loops, like someone trying to send a message back through the system, using our own reports, There's a rule in espionage most people don't understand. If something looks too perfect, it was designed to be. I kept it quiet. Quiet. Didn't file a report. Didn't tell my handler. Just watched. Waited. Then I made a mistake. I approached him. Sighed I'd noticed some anomalies. Asked if he wanted to double-check the log rotation with me. He didn't answer. Just blinked, slow, like a reptile. Then said, "They're not anomalies. They're anchors." That was it. Got up. Left early. I didn't sleep that night. Didn't drink either. I sat in my kitchen, staring at 3 identical strings I'd found across 5 different pages. Anchors. What the hell was he anchoring? Next morning, I checked the outbound transmission list. 3 of the pages with those repeats had already been scanned and forwarded to the Western Relay. Too late, they were out. I confronted the shift supervisor. Asked who cleared the batch. He said Marcus had personally flagged them for priority. Said he'd claimed the codes were urgent military relevance. That they aligned with naval deployment. Orders. I asked which ones. The supervisor shrugged. Sighed Marcus had filed them verbally. Marcus had spoken, but only to the right ears. That afternoon, he left early again. No explanation. Just packed his satchel, nodded once, and walked out like it was a weekend. We weren't even allowed weekends. That was the first time I felt it. Not suspicion. Not fear. Betrayal. Not because he'd lied, but because I'd helped him do it. Signal came through on a Tuesday. Early. Band 4.2 shortwave. Nothing unusual. Until at WASN, single quotes T. One of the radio girls, Elena, flagged it. She was sharp, fast with frequencies, but quiet. The kind of operator who knew when not to know too much. She leaned into my doorway and just said, "We caught a blink." I followed her to the booth. The tape was already spooled. It was brief, 6 seconds. Not voice, not tone. Just a pulse like a heartbeat, clipped by static. Too structured to be random. Too brief to be useful. Unless you knew what to listen. For I didn't say anything. Just asked her to isolate the clip, file it, and forget it. She nodded, but I could tell she already had it. The formal report read unconfirmed anomaly. HQ replied with the usual script. Proceed with internal review. Do not escalate without hardware trace. Hardware trace meant surveillance, which meant look inward. They ordered a full sweep of the equipment, not for malfunctions, for misuse. The logic was simple. If someone was transmitting from inside, they'd leave a footprint. Even the best tech couldn't erase everything. And whoever it was, they weren't rooting externally. They were bouncing the signal just far enough to get out without getting caught. The station chief called me in. Sighed, "Control the exits. No one leaves with gear, notes, or tape." I nodded. Didn't ask why I was picked. I already knew. They trusted me. Or rather, they needed someone too deep to back out. I spent the day at the checkpoint desk. Clipboard, thermal scanner. Random bag checks. Fake smiles. Real fear. Marcus didn't show. That was strange. He never missed a shift. Never took sick days. Never even drank water at his desk. Like his body didn't dare interrupt his work. By noon, I'd asked the records. Clerk to check his log. No absence filed. No call. His workstation was untouched. Except for one thing. The chair had been lowered. He never adjusted it. That seat had been fixed at the same height for 6 months. Someone else had sat there. Or he wanted us to think they had. I went through his drawers. Empty. Cleaner than protocol required. No gum, no lint, no scrawled notes and margins. Just a single folded paper in the back slot. It was blank. Until I tilted it under the light. Impressed type. Faint, like a ghost sentence pressed into the fibers. 4 words. Too late to undo. I didn't tell anyone. Just slipped it into my pocket. The rest of the sweep turned up nothing. No modified wiring. No illegal transmitters. No phone relays. Just static. And absence. The supervisor filed a no-show report. I signed it, with a hand that no longer felt like mine. We told ourselves maybe he got sick. Maybe he'd be back tomorrow. But I knew what that signal was. It was goodbye. And it wasn't sent to us. The desk was ordinary gray steel, state-issued, ugly as sin. We'd all sat at one like it at some point. But this one had Marcus's. Nameplate still taped to the front, half peeled at the edge. And when I saw the maintenance crew wheeling it down the hall for storage, I followed. They were clearing out unassigned stations. That's what they said. No one had touched Marcus's area in days. It was as if the air around it warned people off, like no one wanted to be next. I asked the janitor to give me 5 minutes alone. Told him I was checking for leftover records. He shrugged, gave me the keys, didn't ask questions. Smart man. Inside the empty room. I pulled open each drawer. All clear, same as before. But something felt uneven. The desk wobbled slightly to the left. Not like a missing bolt, more like weight imbalance. I slid it away from the wall and crouched, nothing visible. But the base plate had fresh screws, shiny, new. I unscrewed one, then another, lifted the bottom layer, and there it was, a false compartment. Rough wood edges, not professional, built fast, with purpose. Inside, 3 rolls of carbon paper, old, used, curled, each wrapped around a tight bundle of thin parchment sheets. I pulled one out. It was a D code, ours, stamped, signed, and duplicated, not copied, rewritten. In perfect German, not in our technical format, not in military shorthand, but in flowing, formal language. Each sheet had dates, classifications, routing tags. The same content we processed, mirrored, annotated, repackaged, like someone was making a clean version for a different audience. An internal translation for someone else's archives. I flipped through page after page, dozens, maybe hundreds. And at the bottom of the compartment, a list, just a list, typed in red. Names, not of agents, but of protocols, operations, call signs. Some had asterisks next to them. Some I recognized. Most ID and single quotes T. My stomach turned. I'd seen field reports marked with those operations. Buried missions. Some still active. Some ended with bodies never claimed. I sat on the floor. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. Because I knew what this meant. Marcus hadn't just been copying messages. He'd been curating them, preserving, organizing. For whom, I didn't know. But it wasn't for us. And it wasn't for Moscow either. The format didn't match theirs. This was cleaner, older, institutional, someone else entirely. I folded one sheet, tucked it into my coat, closed the desk, wiped the screws, then walked out. Said nothing. Because if I said something, they'd ask how I found it. And I didn't have a lie ready that I could believe myself. I waited until the hallway was empty. No one left in the code wing. Just me. And Marcus, who'd returned that morning as if nothing had happened. He sat at his desk, sleeves rolled, hands poised over keys. Didn't look up. Didn't ask where everyone was. Just waited. Like he'd been expecting me. I didn't follow protocol. No formal warning. No written citation. I closed the door and pulled the blinds. Sat across from him, close enough to smell the oil on his machine. Someone's been leaking, I said. I think you know that. He didn't flinch, didn't deny it. Didn't offer the usual dance of innocence. just met my eyes and said flatly, "Do you think they don't already know?" I paused, because it wasn't an answer. It was a challenge. Laid the sheet on the desk. One of the carbon copies from under his drawer. German. Clean. Dated. Indexed. "You've been making your own archive," I said. "Your own structure. Bypassing rooting. Bypassing oversight." Still no denial. Just a slight tilt of his head. As if I'd just confirmed a hypothesis for him. "I want to know who it's for," I said. Quiet. "Flat. Stasi? Gru? Or something even further west?" He smiled. First time I'd seen it. Tired. Small. But real. Then he said something that chilled me more than a confession would have. "You knew from the beginning, didn't you?" That's when I felt it. That slow, sinking certainty. Because he wasn't asking. He was confirming. He looked at me like a colleague. Not a threat. Not a mark. Like someone who'd been part of a larger design and only now realized his role. "You signed my clearance," he said. "You flagged my file as high potential." It was true. I had. Months ago, in a stack of applicant summaries, his name had caught my eye. Maybe it was a nudge from Langley. Maybe it was planted. Maybe I was the plant. I sat back. The air felt heavier than it had any right to. "What are you?" I asked. Not who. What? Marcus looked at that typewriter. And at the window. Didn't speak for a moment. Then said, "I'm what happens when both sides start using the same ink." He stood up. Left the room. No panic. No rush. Just left. And I didn't stop him. Because deep down, I wasn't sure if he was the saboteur. Or if I had been the delivery boy all along. They always told us transmissions didn't leave the room. What they never said was some of them never needed to dot. It was a junior tech in the relay room who stumbled on it. A signal echo riding on our outbound line. He thought it was a duplication error. Ran a diagnostic sweep. Found something off. Said it looked like a feedback loop, but one that didn't feed back to us. That it fed forward. To a repeater node in Dresden. And from there, somewhere we couldn't trace. Unless you had clearance I wasn't supposed to have. I pulled up a restricted routing schematic one we'd used in '75 for a sting operation. Dresden had been the fallback relay point for high sensitivity messages. Hidden protocol. Only used in case of emergency. And Marcus had known it existed. The junior tech flagged the signature as machine generated. But the punchline? The machine it came from was ours. Specifically, his Marcus had hardwired a subroutine into his typewriter. You heard that right. The damn thing wasn't just analog. It had been modified. A hybrid interface linked to a microtransmitter. Every time he typed, it logged the strokes, stored them. And every night, at a specific frequency window, it pulsed the data. Short, clean, encrypted. A synthetic heartbeat. He wasn't transmitting messages. He was transmitting us. Every code we decrypted, every sentence we reconstructed, every correction we filed was being rebuilt on the other side. In real time, Moscow didn't need our intercepts. They had our interpretations, direct from our hands. And me? I had signed off on half of them, sometimes without even reading. Efficiency, they called it. Trust in the chain. I went back through the logs, compared the exact timestamps of our transmissions with known Soviet mobilizations. There was alignment. Uncomfortably precise. Worse, some of those messages had strategic value. Movements. Surveillance patterns. Even ID fragments, which meant someone had died because we were fast. Because he was fast. I filed an emergency trace. Code Black Protocol. Didn't even sleep. Next morning, Langley replied with a single sentence. No record of operative by that designation. I sent the personnel file, the signatures. the memos, the approvals including my own. The next reply came 2 hours later. Same line, different phrasing. That individual was never officially placed under agency directive. That's when it hit me, God, he wasn't theirs. And he wasn't the enemy. He was the system. The part that exists in the margins. Too useful to name. Too dangerous to leave behind. And every message I'd trusted, every operation I'd believed in, had passed through his hands first. Straight into the void. Straight into Moscow. I used to think about Leipzig as the moment I earned my keep. Got the intercept late, a coded burst, routed through a Warsaw channel, flagged high priority. I was alone when it came in. Marcus hadn't arrived yet. I remember thinking, finally, something I can handle on my own. It was messy. Not the usual cadence. Chunks missing, irregular spacing. But I worked through it, reconstructed what I could. And the message, when I pieced it together, warned of an ambush. An agent scheduled to extract from Leipzig had been compromised. It read like a miracle. We rerouted, changed the rendezvous point, got him out just in time. HQ sent back a commendation. Hand-delivered. Patted me on the back like I'd just caught a falling bomb. But I remember Marcus watching me that day. Silent, still, not jealous, just thoughtful. He didn't say anything until the next morning. Just laid a page on my desk. My translation, but slightly adjusted. Not in content, in tone. Cleaner, he said. That was all. Then walked away. At the time, I thought he meant I'd done well. Now I know better. I went back to that intercept last week, found the original transcript, pulled the audio log, and what I heard wasn't a warning. It was a directive. Agent must be neutralized before extraction. Leipzig cell exposed. Initiate cover disruption. But Marcus had rearranged it, restructured the syntax, shifted a clause, just enough for me to decode it into a rescue. It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. He wanted me to reroute the agent. Wanted him removed, not saved. Because that man in Leipzig, he wasn't just compromised. He was dangerous. He carried names. Real names. Ours. Theirs. Maybe even his. So Marcus played me? Let me think I'd saved a life. Let me take credit. I asked myself why. Why give me that moment? And then I realized it bought me in. That single act secured my loyalty for months. I defended him. I vouched for him. All because I thought he'd saved an agent. Because I thought he'd saved me. But I wasn't the hero. I was the postman. Just another hand on the envelope. That wasn't salvation. That was leverage. By the time I decided to act, it was too late. I drafted the report. Not official, but damning enough. Outlined the false translations, the embedded codes, the covert signal path to Dresden. It sat in my coat pocket like a loaded pistol. I even timed his arrival, planned to intercept him in the archive corridor, where the walls didn't echo, but Marcus didn't show. Again, I waited till noon, then made the call. HQ patched me through to counterintel. I said the name, his full name. I read out the clearance number, the station designation, the timestamp of his last login. The line went quiet. Then a voice not familiar asked me to repeat the name. Twice. Then came the answer. There is no operative by that designation. Are you requesting personnel review or initiating false identity trace? I said, he's been here for a year. They said, our records indicate no placement under that profile. You may be referencing a contractor or internal referral. That's how they do it. They don't deny him. They erase the question. So I went to his file, pulled the hard copy, opened it on my desk. Photo, resume, signatures, my own initials. On 3 pages. All clean. Too clean. I flipped the dossier over. checked the watermark. Standard form except for the registry code, it didn't match any internal series. It was a dummy, and that's when I remembered something worse. I was the one who submitted that file. I'd signed the clearance. I'd forwarded the approval request. I thought I was following orders. But now, I wasn't sure who had given them. A name came to mind: Rutherford from Legal Division. Except Rutherford had died in '75, stroke. Or so they said. I searched my notes, found nothing. The paper trail ended with me, like I had created him. So I went to the head of personnel, told him I needed access to legacy files. He asked why. I said, cross-checking anomalies. He looked tired, lit a cigarette, then said, "You really think this ends with a file?" and handed me a sealed envelope, unmarked. Inside, a single sheet, typed, "Your participation is acknowledged. Operational overlap confirmed. Exposure risk acceptable." There was no signature. Just one word, centered at the bottom: compromise. I folded it. Didn't speak. Didn't ask Dot, because in that moment, I understood something I'd avoided for too long. They hadn't missed him. They'd used him. And me? I was part of the shipment, not the handler. Not the victim. Just one more fingerprint on the glass. I live in a cabin now, Oregon. Quiet place, cold at night. No neighbors close enough to ask questions. That's why I picked it. But some mornings, usually before dawn, I hear it dot tap, tap, shift, tap dot, always the same rhythm. Not loud, not frantic, just dot dot deliberate. I've torn the place apart twice, checked under floorboards, opened every drawer. I even disconnected the radio once, thinking maybe it was some frequency bleed, but the sound's not electronic. It's memory. I kept the papers. I shouldn't have, but I did. The carbon copies. The ones with his corrections in that precise, inhuman spacing. They're in a locked box under my bed, wrapped in wax paper and gilt. I read them sometimes, looking for a clue. Or maybe an apology. None ever comes. There's one in particular, a decoded line with a time and coordinates. I used to think it was a missed intercept. Now I think it was a meeting point, not for extraction. For handover. To this day, I don't know what was passed, or who received it, but I was part of it. That's the one thing I'm sure of. I signed the forms, cleared the transmissions, read the lies, and never once asked why. Sometimes I wonder if Marcus is still alive, or if he ever existed the way I remember him. But the truth is, he doesn't need to be alive to keep typing. He left enough echoes behind, enough loops, enough silence filled with intent. Every code we cracked, every line we decrypted, every sentence I believed in, they weren't just intelligence. They were bullets, invisible, accurate, and they were fired from our own hands. If you made it this far, maybe you were meant to hear this. Subscribe if you want to know what else never made it to the files. And tell me in the comments, did you already know about any of this? Or did I just ruin your sleep?